So we're talking about BFRB. So right now I can't see many people. So if you do have a question, just put it in the chat or raise hand and I will try to either address it as I go along or we'll have time at the end to answer any questions. So that being said, we'll get started. So what are BFRBs? So by definition, it's a group of related behaviors that involve repetitive compulsive actions that typically harm or cause discomfort to the body. So how I even will address this with clients is I kind of give the example, if any of you have been to the zoo and you go to the monkey house, oftentimes you see the monkeys playing with each other's hair, they're grooming. That is basically what BFRBs are. We all engage in them. They can be, it's typical grooming behaviors that all humans do. When we're looking in the mirror and we see a zit and we just have the urge to pop it, or our hair is out of place, whatever it may be, a hangnail. But with BFRBs, what happens is that part in your brain that's like that self-grooming behavior gets overactive. Okay, so it just gets very trigger happy, and we'll get more into it, but it's basically, it starts as grooming, but then it can turn into a way of coping with stress, anxiety, or other emotional triggers, and they can be very difficult to control. The two reasons are, one, it can be intentional. So there's the like, okay, I've seen a hangnail, I'm going to rip that off. I'm thinking about it, I'm doing it intentionally. But then the harder part is that they're also habitual. Like, you know, when you're maybe studying for an exam, and you are a nail biter, you don't even realize that your hand is in your mouth and you're biting your nails because it's such a habit. So then by the time you realize it, oh no, it's too hard to control. You know, you've already ripped off 2 nails, whatever may have you. The biggest thing with working with BFRBs and clients is discussing shame, and I'll get further into that. But the first part about that is that understanding that BFRBs are not self-harm. Although they may cause some harm to the body, they are not considered a form of self-harm. This is for many differences of self-harm can have more damaging effects, and they differ significantly in the intent, emotional function, and level of harm. BFRBs are often repetitive, unconscious habits, while self-harm is typically a more intentional, emotional response to distress. Although they both can coexist and both require understanding and appropriate care. So the first step for BFRBs is to build awareness. So it's really getting curious with our clients of where in the body it occurs, how often, what triggers it, and what are they looking for / trying to feel. I'm going to get more into that. Okay. So I also want to talk about the difference between BFRBs and OCD, because I think that kind of gets lost in translation a little bit. And as we work so much with OCD, I've had a lot of clients kind of ask me, is this a form of OCD? And the answer is that it's not, but they are very similar. So the similarities being that they're both repetitive behaviors, both involve repetitive actions. In OCD, people may engage in compulsive behaviors to alleviate anxiety caused by intrusive obsessions. But in BFRBs, people engage in repetitive behaviors like hair pulling, skin picking, nail biting, usually without the intrusive obsessive thoughts. The other thing is emotional triggers. So both can be triggered by stress or anxiety, although they manifest differently. Impulsive, both can involve impulsive urges, and then difficult to control. The difference is the underlying thought process, kind of like what I was saying before about OCD is characterized by persistent unwanted obsessions. So those intrusive thoughts and fears that lead to compulsions, aka the repetitive actions aimed at reducing anxiety or preventing the feared events. Whereas BFRBs, on the other hand, are often not driven by the same type of intrusive thoughts. The BFRB is driven by a combination of habits, urges, sensory satisfaction, rather than a response to an obsessive thought. Okay. The awareness of behavior, people with BFRBs may be aware that they're engaging in the behavior, but might not be fully understanding or be able to control it. In contrast, people with OCD are typically more aware that they're engaging in compulsions, and they may be irrational, but feel compelled to perform them anyway due to the anxiety that they cause. The focus of the behaviors, BFRBs are more focused on physical actions such as pulling hair, biting nails, and OCD compulsions can have a similar effect, but they're mostly often focused on mental rituals or physical actions meant to neutralize a specific fear. And then the functionality, BFRB's behavior is often done without a clear purpose beyond like revealing a compulsion or sensation. And OCD compulsive behaviors are generally performed with the goal of preventing harm or reducing anxiety tied to a specific obsession. So again, while both are involved repetitive behaviors and a sense of loss of control, they arise from different cognitive and emotional processes. So psychoeducation. So for a lot of people that come with us, I mean, BFRBs are so rarely talked about. So just providing psychoeducation for some folks, that can be 50% of the treatment right there, of just understanding what's going on and really helping take away part of that shame piece can be so huge for some individuals. So again, like I said before, if it's a helpful area of the brain necessary for good hygiene, but for individuals experiencing BFRBs, it's just a bit more overeager. And we are working to kind of neutralize that and have it become less eager, how to control the urge, how to ride out the urge wave in those situations. So again, everyone engages in different BFRBs throughout the day, such as cracking knuckles, touching hair, licking lips. I think I've done every single one of those right now in the last 11 minutes. So we all do them, but it's about doing like it's overactive and it's causing distress either to the individual or also sometimes parents bring in their child of noticing these BFRBs are becoming a problem. So nothing in itself is wrong with BFRBs unless causing distress for the client, right? So that's another big thing. And that's like with most of our treatments, right? Of like folks can have OCD, but if it's not causing distress, they might not want to work on it. So with working with BFRBs, this is someone coming to you of like, I've always wanted to work on this. I don't know how. I'm so embarrassed to talk about it. And that's when treatment can begin versus like, yeah, like I picked my nails, but I don't want to deal with that right now. Meeting clients where they're at. So treatment entails increasing awareness, stimuli control, and competing responses, which I'm going to get into in the next slide. But just so you know, those are the big 3 parts of treatment. It's important to note, just kind of like anxiety, BFRBs will never go away in your brain. They will always find it satisfying to engage in that behavior. But the less you do it, the smaller that urge will become. Just like with all of us, the more we engage in something, the stronger that urge becomes. And the goal is to block the behavior as early in the behavior chain as possible. So again, we're really, when we have them track, which again, we'll get into, we're looking at the antecedent. The antecedent is most important with tracking because we want to be able to put an intervention there so that we can block the behavior before it's even kind of started. So this is like the example that I think we often talk about is an alcoholic like sitting at the bar with a shot in their hand and saying, okay, don't drink, versus someone driving past the bar. Much easier to keep driving than it is to not drink when you're sitting there with the alcoholic beverage in your hand. Okay, so I want to just pause. Is there any questions so far? Anything in the chat? Okay, we're good. So going to get into, for an intake, what we will do is, oh, whoopsies. Okay. What we will do is, this is how we get the outcome measure and assess the severity of it. So I'm going to switch screens and go on the LOA website to the assessments. Okay. So this is how it looks. So this is, again, for trichotillomania, skin picking. It can be any of the BFRBs, biting nails. And what you will do is when you're assessing, you can just switch out the language for, okay, let's say someone's coming in for hair pulling. Just say the hair pulling part. You don't need to say skin picking. Again, if you mess up, it's okay. Clients, you know, it's understandable. We all make mistakes, but just to be aware that you don't have to say word for word what the question's asking. You can just change it to whatever the presenting BFRB is. So I think it'd be helpful if I went through this with somebody. So do I have someone who mind volunteering so that we can go through this screener together and how I might fill it out? And I can't see you all. So anyone? Oh, Jessica, awesome. Thank you. Okay. Okay, Jessica, what BFRB are you coming in with today?
Hair pulling.
Okay, hair pulling. You want to work on it? You've been hair pulling. Yes. So in the average day for the past week, how often did you spend pulling hairs? Would you say 15 minutes or less, 16 to 30, 31 to 60, an hour to 2, or more than 2?
I'd say an hour to 2.
An hour to 2? Okay. And also this part can become very difficult for clients to talk about it. So the more like casual and just unassuming that you can be when approaching this question, the easier it is for people to talk about. So let's go, where on the body did you pull, especially this week? So was it your scalp, eyebrow, eyelashes, arm, leg, or anywhere else in your body, and also your pubic hair?
I would say this week it's been more focused on my scalp, and then a little bit in my eyebrows.
Okay. Is there anywhere else I didn't ask about that you've been pulling?
No.
Okay. So you can just leave that blank then. And then how much time did you spend pulling hairs yesterday? It's the same, like 15 minutes or less? Was it that same 1 to 2 hours or more than 2?
I would say yesterday was pretty busy, so probably only about 15 minutes.
Okay. You say 15 or less, or 16 to 30?
Oh, 16 to 30.
Okay. Yeah. And then I know it's hard to think about, but what were some of the thoughts or feelings that were occurring before you engaged in hair pulling? Were you feeling anxious and it helped calm you down? Did you feel compelled to pull and just reacted to that? Or did you have a troublesome thought or have it and made the thought okay?
It's probably a little bit between feeling anxious and then just feeling compelled to pull and just reacting.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit of both?
A little bit of both, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that you noticed, like thinking back on it, that might have been occurring?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. Now, did you make any attempt to resist the urge to pull?
Is this over the past week or just yesterday?
Just yesterday.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Gotcha. So have you ever been able to resist the urge to pull before, or do you just, when you get the urge, you automatically do it?
I usually, if I catch myself and I'm like in public or something, I will resist the urge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So you'd say, so you did put like some effort in resisting, but yesterday specifically, you did not resist and you pulled.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. I know you guys can't see on the PowerPoint, but when I start off by saying yes or no, did you attempt to pull? Because there's about like 10 options in there. See where they go from there. So if they say yes, that already narrows it down to 4 options. If they say no, same thing. And then from there asking, in language that folks understand of like, okay, when you get that urge, are you able to resist it? Rather than, did you make some effort, no effort, a little bit of effort? It can get overwhelming for folks. So kind of making it a conversation is a lot more easy for folks to talk about than if you're just drilling the questions, which sometimes assessments can kind of feel like we have to. Now, Jessica, how bothered are you by this habit?
I would say on like a scale from 1 to 5, probably it's getting closer to like a 4 or 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So typically as a clinician, I round up, especially in the beginning of like, I want to know. So, okay, when someone says a 4 or 5, I'm hearing 5 of like, this is really bothersome. And sometimes it's hard to admit that. So that's how I err on the side of caution. Everybody's different, but personally, especially for the first intake, I might round it to the higher one versus the lower. And then how much does hair pulling or skin picking interfere with your daily life? On a scale 1 to 5, 5 being a great deal, 0 being none.
I'd say probably right around a 3.
Okay. In the middle of the road. Okay. And then I know this is hard to think about, but in what ways does hair pulling interfere with your daily life? Some people, it's resulting in appearance or prohibits activities of not wanting to go someplace because of how much you pulled, or is it because of interference of time spent pulling, of it's interfering with your work, or you're late to a dinner because of it, or it can also be both or another reason. What would you say?
I'd say probably a little bit of both, a little column A, a little column B.
Okay. And then is there anything else for reasons that I didn't ask that you think would be important to note?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. So then I press submit. Mhm. Okay. Great. So it's out of 20, the score is a 14. So this is pretty moderate to severe impairment. So what I would do is I would copy and paste this into the intake note. And then I would put like the score 14, I put moderate to severe impairment next to there. And then I would also go back and copy and paste anything that's important in here. So I'd want to know it was 1 to 2 hours in the average day. I'd want to know where it was, like things to remember. So then when we reassess, we can say, oh, look, like you were at 1 to 2 hours before, and now it's under 30 minutes. Rather than saying, oh, your score went down, like kind of like the GAD-7 or PHQ-9, which also you should do this then too, of like looking at those answers. But especially when it comes to BFRBs, we really want to, like, everything is progress of like, okay, maybe it's the same places, but it was less, or spent time pulling, or less anxiety connected to it. So that's really important. Thank you, Jessica, my volunteer. Let me switch back. Okay, so I said this earlier, but again with BFRB, so this is important clinical information obtained in that intake session. So understanding and also providing the psychoeducation that it is intentional and also habitual. It can be both, it can be one or the other. Typically in my time of working with BFRBs, it's usually always both. So how we assess this is using the SCAMP model. Is we want folks to immediately after that first intake to start tracking. It can be saved to the second intake, but very early on in treatment, we want them to start tracking because we want to notice patterns and also figure out where we can implement interventions in the antecedent. So I'm actually going to skip ahead and show this of assigning SCAMP. So if sorry, I feel like I'm just bouncing around. I'm going to go to therapy notes now and show you all that in the library page on therapy notes, you will find the SCAMP model. It is down in the BFRB symptom tracking form. And you can just share this on the portal with your client of sending it through, and then they should get the email, or if they log onto their portal, they'll be able to see it. So let me go back. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh, okay. So in the tracking form, so date and time. So also when I assign tracking, again, that level of shame of saying, I don't care how many times you track. I don't care if you fill out 10 of these sheets. That's not what we're looking for. Again, we're all looking for patterns to try to figure out what are the antecedents and what are the patterns so that we can effectively place interventions. Just saying, yeah, I pick a lot at night. That doesn't help because, again, a lot of it's habitual that you might not even be realizing that you are picking at school or at work because you're so aware of it at night. So again, it's figuring out when it's happening. So date and time. So putting that in because we want to know, okay, is it every day? Is it in the mornings, afternoons, nights? That's very important. Sensory. So that is like if someone is, let's say it's hair pulling. So I say when you're like, are you looking for a hair? Like putting your hand through your, running your hand along your scalp. Is it like the perfect hair? I've had people say, yes, like I look for a thick hair or like a coiled hair. Sometimes it's a gray hair. That's all sensory. So that's feeling, that's visual. It can also be smell. I haven't heard taste, but of course, like that can be one. So any of those visual sensory details. So they're looking for a hair or they see a piece of skin on their fingers. My most recent client that I've gotten for BFRBs is picking scabs at their scalp. So they are looking for like a flaky scab, like they are feeling around for it, okay? Cognitive thoughts. So that is, are you really stressed of like, oh, I'm working on a work presentation and I notice like this is going on. I'm really nervous for this presentation. So that's like any thoughts that they're noticing. And then similar affects and feelings. Are you doing it when you're stressed? Are you doing it when you're bored? Okay, that's a huge one. So figuring that out. Motor behavior, again, I have my desk right here. This is a huge one. My arms propped up. I can easily run my hand through my hair. Okay, this is so easy. So figuring that out, if it's just like, oh, when I'm sitting at my desk, hand is in hair. When I'm watching TV, my hand is in my hair. So figuring out that, if it's just like that motor behavior part. And then severity of the urge. So this is explaining that like 1 to 10, 10 being a very high urge, but I could not resist this even if I tried. So for like that client I was just mentioning, for her, if she found like the perfect scab, that's like a 10. I'm like, there's no way, versus, okay, I'm looking around, I can't really feel a scab. So I don't really feel the urge too much. Like I still want to, but it's not nowhere as near if I found like my perfect scab or my perfect piece of hair. And then duration. So this is, again, I kind of give it up to the client, whatever is easiest for them to track, whether it's the amount of time they spent, maybe the amount of hairs, amount of scabs, whatever it is. Like I kind of put that in the ballpark, but I just want some area of like how long it was. And then intervention, I tell them usually at first of like, I'm not expecting when we first assign this that you'll implement an intervention. Sometimes people come to me and they're like, you know what, I noticed that when I have my nails painted a certain way, I do not peck. I'm like, okay, and your nails are already painted that way. So put that as an intervention of like, that's making it harder. So intervention means something that you're implementing that makes it harder or almost like impossible to do. Okay, it doesn't mean like you necessarily aren't able to pull, but it makes it harder. So their hair pulling, I have clients who wear their hair in a ponytail. You can still pull, but it is much harder. So that severity or that duration might be shorter because your hair is up. Okay. So again, it's fine to have that be blank the first time as we really are trying to figure out patterns and antecedents. I haven't assigned interventions just yet, but if they have an intervention that they already use, like a fidget toy too, they can put that in there of like, I tried to use this or I did use it and I was successful. Also, I mostly work with adults. So when I do this with my adult clients, I say, I really expect you to bring this sheet with you everywhere you go. So notes on your phone of like, you can write it in there and then transfer it to the sheets later. And then with my kiddos, like they might write it in their notebook and stuff and transfer it. So I say like, you don't have to bring this around in your pocket everywhere, but just if you could write it somewhere so that you're aware and can transfer it over later is great. I've heard that there's apps out there. So kind of figuring that out of like what works best for your client and easiest to track. No one's perfect. You know, we can't expect our clients to be perfect. So I also say that it's okay if you miss some. The whole point is just if you can get 90% in there, hey, that's huge. So yeah. Any questions on the SCAMP model? Okay. Keep going. It's time to go back. So yeah, so that's the SCAMP. Also current sets. So checking in, I know we do this with phobia clients as well, or just, you know, anyone coming with us. If I might stop in the middle of the intake when they're talking to me about their BFRB and say, okay, scale 1 to 10, how are you feeling talking about this with me right now? Sometimes it's a 9. I've never talked about this before. I hate even admitting it right now. I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's pause on this. So again, assessing where your client is at. Sometimes people are like, you know what, I'm a 2. I'm actually really relieved that I'm talking about this. I'm so happy I'm in treatment. So really, where is your client at before you take those next steps? Explore clients' beliefs regarding BFRBs. So again, I just had an intake recently about this and asked the client. Typically, I've had people like, I looked it up, I went on Reddit, which I think as therapists, we hate the Reddit app, but there's just so much out there. So I kind of assess, okay, what stigmas have you read or what, you know, misinformation or myths have you read about it? And then maybe try to debunk that. But almost, I would say, I don't want to say always, but there's typically a level of shame on there of like, why can't I stop this? It's disgusting. It's a horrible behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And we really want to work with clients on that, of really debunking that shame, of normalizing the behavior of, again, everybody does it. It's just with sometimes people that part of their brain gets overactive. Depending, sometimes I share of, I'm a nail picker. I used to pick my nails. If I don't have my nails done, I'm a goner. I always have to have my nails done. And sometimes that kind of helps. Oh, like, wow, like everybody does engage in it. I've also had a professor once told me, and I share this with you guys, of never ask a client to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. So again, as a nail picker, as someone, we've all engaged in BFRBs, like to tell your client, yeah, oh, this client was like, oh, if I never watch TV, I'll never pick up my scabs. I'm like, okay, that is ridiculous. I'm not gonna tell you to never watch TV because that will, help. Let's pick out interventions that will help you be able to watch TV without picking. So kind of assessing that too, of like, make it most realistic. If you wanna be able to do it yourself, it's hard to expect that a client would be able to do it too. Again, it should be collaborative in that way. Level of motivation. I've had people come for hair pulling. They're like, my wedding's in 6 months. I don't have enough hair to put up, or, things like that. Or this is getting so bothersome. Like, I hate it. It's hurting. My client I have now, she really caused pain and was bleeding for a while. So that was kind of like, okay, what am I doing? I need to stop to work on this. So those motivations were like at a 9 or 10. Usually when people come to us, especially for BFRBs, their motivation's pretty high. Otherwise they probably wouldn't be coming so much, but it could be this part of like, I've done it my whole life. I don't know how I'm possibly going to change. So that's usually the typical type of motivation where I'm seeing the motivation decrease of assessing that. What have you tried so far? What has been helpful and what has been less helpful? So again, in my experience, someone that's tried something. So they're like, okay, like this client has done Vaseline on their scabs, but they're like, oh, it didn't really work. The biggest thing too is like, well, it didn't work because you didn't have a therapist keeping you accountable week after week. So just because someone has tried something, they say it doesn't work, explain to them, hey, like it might work now that you have someone keeping you accountable and talking you through it. And like, I'll explain what other emotions and situations are going on when you're doing this. So, really asking them about that and the accountability piece of like, we are going to work on this together, of like, you'd be surprised at just how much knowing, like, again, if you don't do the intervention next week, nothing happens. You don't get kicked out of therapy. You don't get a bad grade. It's really trying to figure out what works best for you. This client told me, they're like, they pick a lot in the shower. And they're like, I had my hand in my hair and then I heard your voice. And I was like, whoa, what? It was really funny. Like, I realized that Alexis will not care if I pick in the shower, but I'll be letting myself down by having to tell her that I did that. And like that little thing of like knowing like my therapist cares for me. It's not that I don't care, but it's like, I would only be hurting myself by doing this. I don't get a bad grade in therapy. It's just that I would have to admit to myself. And that's a really cool, part of therapy, of like folks working on themselves and knowing that someone keeps them accountable and cares for them. Okay, so treatment for BFRBs. So I'll just do the habit reversal training. I'm sure Dr. Franklin must have talked about this last week with tics and Tourette's, but habit reversal, so building awareness, like I said, of really the tracking forms are so important for figuring out when the patterns and antecedent, implementing a competing behavior. Okay, so say like right now I'm holding my water bottle. Okay, I cannot physically pick my nails while I'm holding this. I mean, I can try and I can get creative, but it is much harder when I'm holding my water bottle. So that is a competing response is that like I am making something of like, I cannot physically do it. It is so hard. So I am having to sit out that urge of riding the wave while I hold my water bottle or figuring out another situation. Similar to that, stimuli control. So environmental manipulation to create like speed bumps to make it more difficult. Okay, so bright lights in your bathroom. Okay, that's like a BFRB dream of like I can see all the hairs and my eyebrow hairs, all these things. Dimming the lights. You can still see them. You can brush your hair out. You can do all those things, but it makes it a little bit harder, right? So that if they skin picking especially, or also hair picking, tweezers. Like, okay, are you using any tools that help you? Get rid of them. Or, I mean, again, I'm working with my client. Like, I don't think I could get rid of my tweezers. Of like, put them in a faraway room, put them above the refrigerator if it's harder to get to. So these little interventions that are making it harder to do or cause a delay. So you're having to ride out that urge. Okay. The co-model is, again, like that SCAMP of identifying functional components of BFRB through self-monitoring. So figuring out, okay, look, you are picking so much at your desk. And this is a huge one because it is so easy and it's in private. Privacy is a huge part of most people do it when they're alone. So again, figuring out little fidget toys that work best. Assessing to say fidget toys, there are so many fidget toys out there, and maybe I'll send an email too of specific fidget toys for specific BFRBs of like, especially the finger ones of like that finger fixation, oral fixation of just wanting something like that, of figure out what is it that you like, and then let's find a specific fidget toy for that. The picky pads are amazing. They're messy and like I wouldn't want one, but everybody else who has them loves them. And they're just really great for, again, it's beads, it's reusable, great for the environment. There's fidget pens, good fidget toys for school that don't make noise. So having those, okay, we need a fidget at your desk. We need multiple. We need some at the couch by the TV. We need some in the car, those places. And then with everything also implementing like some DBT for that emotion regulation, mindfulness, being present, ACT, of course, and again, like I already said, the mindfulness. So we're using basically all the different modalities, but the two main ones I would say are HRT and the Cone model. Okay, I think next. Okay, so parents and BFRBs. So as with most things, the child needs to be motivated to work on the BFRBs. So not enough for the parents to experience the stress that like, oh, they keep picking their nails or keep pulling of, okay, but we need the child to be motivated to want to work on that. So sometimes that's in creating extrinsic motivation of like, hey, if like you stop picking your nails or if you don't pick your nails, all week, you get some type of reward of trying to figure out if we can pull on that, seeing how motivated they are. And so if the child is motivated, asking them, so giving them kind of that autonomy of how they would like parents to be involved. So do they want parents to point out when they engage in the behavior, which I've had done. And I ask parents, I'm like, don't be like the police with it. I'm like, you're doing it. But sometimes I'll have them do something where it's like, the child's talking, they're pulling at their hair, so the parent will just like put a finger up of like just to let the client know they can keep talking, but it's like, hey, you're doing this, and it's not like an outright, it's just like an awareness piece of it. And then what would they like the parents to say or do? So oftentimes parents are like, you're doing it. It's like, okay, that does not help. So asking a child like, okay, well, what can mom and dad say to help you, or what can they do that makes you feel like they're working with you, not against you? Educating parents, BFRB is not self-harm. BFRB alone is not a sign of trauma. Okay, BFRBs can be a sign of emotional distress, right? Of like it can be a response to stress and you're doing it, but does not necessarily mean that your child has experienced trauma because they are developed a BFRB. So again, trying not to nag or punish or criticize child for engaging in the BFRB. These tactics will, and explaining this to parents, these will not work if we are increasing the shame and stigma that the child may already feel. Especially kids can be cruel at school. So again, if we can make home and therapy just a welcoming environment where we can reduce the shame and everything, that is what's going to get the child to want to work on it, to want to talk about it. And then we can all work together. All right. I think the next slide's a case study. So let me look. Okay, the parents can't be there in those moments like the BFRBs are used during anxious. Anna, can you explain what you're asking?
Yeah, 100%. Totally also had like a misspell in that. So I totally get that's not good to read. I had a client previously where it was only happening at school due to like if someone raised their voice or something like that, the immediate BFRBs of like picking her skin, picking her nails, sometimes to the point of bleeding. Just because loud voices, and it wouldn't even be anyone berating her, but it would be just like that. And so just when the parent couldn't be there and it had to be like there wasn't really anyone to remind her. I wondered if you had any pointers on that, or would it be just kind of like, all right, maybe just kids too young, or like, what is do you have any insight on that at all? If the parents can't be there to assist in terms of reminding them, because I don't know if the teachers or anything, that's where my brain went. That was a difficult one where finding motivation for the kiddo without the parents helping out because it was during school was very difficult.
How old is the child?
He was like 6.
6. Oh, so very young. And and they were picking at their nails?
Yeah.
Same. Yeah. And I guess what interventions had you tried? What were they doing?
There were fidgets type of things that helped a ton, or like maybe we sit on our hands whenever we get nervous and we can hug ourselves, things like that. But just that anxiety during class and the fact that it was like how she had to be the one to remind herself, it became very difficult. And eventually, like during the summer, anxiety eased, but so we discontinued care, but just didn't know if you had any pointers that I was unaware of.
I'm thinking because of like that situation and like that SCAMP model, it sounds very much of like the cognitive and the feelings of, I would more so treat the anxiety that's occurring when someone raises their voice or in those situations versus, okay, using this intervention, just because of like, we could teach that, but they're still dealing with the anxiety. So I wonder if we were to reduce the anxiety, they can better use the interventions of like a fidget toy or Vaseline on their hands, like lotion, whatever a 6-year-old would use in those situations.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Alexis. I appreciate it.
Of course. That's a tough one though. Six is hard all around the board and whatever you're working on. Okay, so this is my case example to work through. So this is actually a client I was just talking about. So she is 38 years old, a cisgender white woman. She is skin picking of the scalp. So again, looking for those scabs. Second problem is learning better emotion regulation. She was previously diagnosed with ADHD, has done research online about BFRBs, but has never received treatment for it. She's self-employed, so she works from home. Married, no children, and from her history, she was, I'm committed to making progress and make my mental health a priority. So I guess the first thing is like maybe questions you guys would ask her, how you would approach this intake. What are some things into your head? Actually, I asked it. Oh, also a question to the group. So I was very specific with some of these things I put on there. So also if you want to answer, why you would think I would put ADHD on there, why that's important, and also why it's important that she works from home. Okay. Joey.
I would almost ask like regarding if she works from home, regarding like the distance that she has, if ever, from like her space of work. Because if she associates that with stress and she's like sitting at a desk, that could be like a kind of a prime spot for her to participate in what was it, the hair pulling or whatever the BFRB is.
Definitely. Okay. That's great. Sarah?
Yeah, I was just thinking like if I guess learning about patterns, like is it when you're at your desk? Is it when you're not? Is it around the apartment? Are you? And then I think I would also get into like making a list of what else could we do with our hands? Is it when you're typing or just in a meeting? Just what are your hands doing right before that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I was just curious, do you normally make like a list of those competing behaviors with the client, or do you give them suggestions? How do you?
Yeah, it's really about what's going on. That's why I personally love working with BFRBs. One, like I think the treatment is so structured, which I'm a very type A person. Like I love structure. So I really like that. And it's also so fun to get creative with them of like what helps you specifically. Like, and it's just, so interesting where someone's motivation come from and stuff. So this one, she hates the feeling of Vaseline, and that alone of like, ooh, I have to put Vaseline on. No, I'm going to resist this urge. It's like we don't even have to get to the intervention because she hates it so much, and that alone can help. So this person, we are using Vaseline, which it's working for better or for worse.
Cool.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Sarah. Susan.
Well, I think having ADHD would make it harder to treat. And so I would maybe encourage, I think it'd be hard for her to keep track using a tracking form. So I would try it at first to see how it would go, but I maybe would not try it for very long, just to try to see if it would work. And then maybe make a suggestion to switch to like the bracelet, the habit aware bracelet, and then work on programming that to help her, because I think it would be harder for her with the ADHD overall.
Yeah, exactly. The ADHD doesn't make it get harder for the reasons why. I found also for ADHD, it can help them focus. So they plant their hair, but it's able to make them focus in class, just like how a lot of kiddos with ADHD need fidgets in order to focus. Sometimes they will turn to these BFRBs to help them. So, and that makes it harder because this is helping them in one way. So now we're treating both. We need to figure out another way for the executive functioning to assist. And then also to treat the BFRB of being aware of it too, of like it can be harder to pay attention to when you are doing it. So treating the ADHD, this is when medication can help. They use stimulants also. There's no medication that is approved for BFRB specifically, but I found many of my clients with BFRBs have said success. ADHD or not with ADHD medication. I think guanfacine might be the most prescribed for that. That's that norepinephrine inhibitor, and that could be helpful. So just to discuss, or if this is also a way I've noticed that a client might be a good candidate for a neuropsych evaluation. So this is also, if you do notice that there can be some overlap. Yeah, thank you, Susan. Sure. Dr. Kevin?
Yeah, I think with like your question of like why is it important that she's self-employed and working from home is like there's no one to monitor like and say like, hey, you're doing it again. And so figuring out like some way where like she can be more aware is going to be another challenge of like trying to figure out like how to help this person out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That is the hardest thing of like you are fully self accountable of like, can you do this? And that's when things can get the most severe. So I think when I see people and they are self-employed, it's like it's gotten to a point it's very disturbing how far the BFRB is taken. All right, thanks everyone. Before Sarah, so Jessica, so question, the habit aware bracelet clients. I have not used it transparently in my 4 years of working here. And that is because when I was first working with my clients, there was some financial difficulties. I'm not sure the pricing on it, but I just had a few clients in a row that weren't able to afford it. So it kind of made me have to get creative and look at other things. I know it's very, clients have a lot of success with it. Just me personally, I haven't used it. Yeah, they're 150. In my typical age group, I was seeing a lot of college kids. So again, for them to afford therapy in general was a lot. So I got creative with it. But it's great. If your client can afford it, then by all means. But personally, I've had success without it. So that also shows if like your client cannot afford it, there are other treatments and modalities that you can use that are just as successful. Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the second presenting problem being learning better emotional regulation. So she's maybe regulating her emotions with the skin picking. So
yes,
that's also like as you're working on the skin picking and doing that, proceed whatever it's called, like the treatment for that. Then
yes,
like, at the same time working on alternative ways of coping. And then I think like the two in tandem would then increase her success.
Yep, definitely. Exactly. Of having already emotion regulation problems or like the low distress tolerance, we really need to focus on that too in tandem with the skin picking. So again, it can look like I kind of dedicate, it depends on each client, but especially with her, of like the first 20 minutes is about reviewing those forms, talking about interventions. And the other half of session is like, we need to talk about the distress tolerance, what's going on in her life, what's the anxiety and stress. So it's not just all dedicated 53 minutes to your tracking forms, try this intervention, because that's a lot. It can be, but very much so, yes, working on shame. Also talking about the cycle of shame, which I can share too, of discussing that with clients can be huge. But I really try to get into figuring out the language that is most inclusive and so that to really break down that shame cycle. Again, we all engage in BFRBs, just get a little overactive. Okay. Now, does anyone have any questions or comments? Also stuff that they can share that when they work with BFRBs?
Alexis,
Yes.
sorry, Rebecca, I jumped in, but if you were just, I kind of asked Dr. Franklin a little bit yesterday or last week, but I'm going to shift a minute to what would you say to just a client that's coming in for BFRBs? Like you're kind of like quick
Mhm.
1 minute, 2 minute, 30-second, just, this is what I would tell a client who's coming to me for BFRBs.
Mhm. Like I said before, like that monkey thing, I kind of bring that up. It kind of makes it lighter in the room, if it's not so serious. So that I use that one of like that reference. You ever see monkeys in doing that? And I say, again, the biggest thing is we all do BFRBs. It's just a part in our brain that gets overactive and trigger happy. And that's what the treatment is. We are just trying to quiet that part of our brain. So we just decrease it. The goal is not to eliminate it, just like we cannot eliminate anxiety. It's important. We just want to decrease it. Okay. So again, if an intervention of like, I tried it, but I still pulled, you pulled less. Okay. Pulling your hair up. If you pulled 3 hairs instead of 30 or, whatever it is, we are just looking at what makes it harder to pull or pick, whatever it may be. So yeah. Also, this was a transfer client from Dr. Franklin too. So she knows Dr. Franklin's my old supervisor. She knows I love BFRBs. I think maybe that's why she'll send them my way. But that's another thing too. Sometimes you get transfer BFRBs and having to pick up where someone else left off. So I'd really be going over, what they were doing and what worked, what didn't work, and then some of the other interventions that they used. A great visual of the brain. I don't think so. Zia asked, do you have a great visual of the brain to explain where it works? No, I don't think so. I think I just explain and do my like flashing of like it gets overactive. But I can search for that. I'm sure that would be helpful if anyone else wants to. Or where's Jessica Katz if she can make a Canva of a brain? Yeah. Anyone else? Or anyone's working with client BFRBs that they can share? Or what they're doing? Yeah, go ahead, say hey. Or Rebecca, I'm so sorry.
So I do have a client hers is skin picking of her fingers, like when she's on calls for work, because she's hybrid. And then also she picks the skin on the bottom of her heels. And just like you said, Alexis, like one of the things that really stuck with her was when I explained everyone kind of does the grooming. It's just when it gets overactive and like anxiety is kind of feeling it a little bit. And reducing the shame around picking has been a big one for her. Like that's what she kind of says has helped reduce it the most. If she does decide to pick, she'll go into the bathroom and just cut off the the skin versus like doing an hour session. And she said that that's really helped. Like, okay, I can go in and just cut it off and then be done with it and then go on the rest of my day. So that's cut it down a lot. Kind of just figuring out like what works for her as terms of tracking and all of that. And just really focusing on like the psychoeducation in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Of that shame piece is so huge. I think they go hand in hand. So yeah, it can be 80% of the treatment of just learning that and hearing that. And again, if it's like that reduces the time and the severity of it, then that's what happens. If it makes the client's good with it, then I'm good with it. They're picking, but it's a lot less damaging, then
yeah,
that's okay by all means. I was gonna say some other like interventions I've used is like, especially if they work from home, gloves, like they can have gloves at the desk. They're not in there. Oh, thanks, Jessica. They can have gloves at their desk, like things at home that you can intervent that maybe you can't bring out with you. So like gloves at desk, Vaseline is huge, makes it harder to pick, not impossible. Again, putting your hair up. Sometimes this happened with one client, especially my bride. She put her bridal hairstyles like in front of her computer, and she's like, okay, every time I picked, I looked at that. I was like, no, like I don't want to. Like remembering your motivation for why you want to can also be really helpful. So again, every client's unique, but as clinicians, I would say be curious, get like curious with it. I think that is like a less shame technique of like, we are just getting curious of why it's happening, what's going on with you. And I think that kind of gets the client also to be more open with everything. Yeah, Dr. Simon.
For the like person who's like working alone and they're on their computer. Is it helpful to have something like a mirror or a camera to like monitor yourself? Or does that make it worse because it's like, oh, now I can see what I'm doing? And then like, I don't know if you've got any experience with that.
Yes, definitely. Well, that's even with the tracking forms, people will say that. Like now I have to look and see, wow, I really picked this week. So assess with your client if they're like, yeah, like it sucks that now I have to see it, but it's motivating me. Like I really want to get this over with. Then hey, then it's motivating. If they're like, no, like I hate this feeling, like it doesn't make me stop, then okay, let's try something else. But again, it's person by person. So I would just assess that before shipping it away. Is even with the tracking forms person, I was like, okay, maybe we don't track this week. She goes, no, I want to track. I hate it, but I like it because it's helping me, and it's putting me one step closer. So I guess I would just, really inquire or assess like how that client is feeling.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Nice. Okay. So a lot of people have 11 a.m.s.
Yeah, so I can stop the recording. Just wanted to mention all of the resources. I know on the drive, we do even have like websites that people can go on to find like fun fidgets that they like. So they can click on the website and maybe order one that they like. So I think there's some resources on the drive. I know there's a ton under BFRBs, but specific to kind of some interventions on there as well that we've learned over the years seem to work for people. So feel free to check out the drive as well. And Alexis, thank you so very much.